This morning's guest paints with his fingers, but it's from his heart. Meet him, coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at Collector's Cafe and Art Gallery on Kings Highway in Myrtle Beach between 76th and 79th Avenues North. We're focused on finger painting, and we're visiting with the founder of the Shaw School and Studio in Durham, North Carolina, Bryan Carey. Good morning, Bryan.
Good morning, Greg.
Thank you so much for coming in early on a Wednesday morning and obviously making the trip down. I know you came down last night from the Triangle. It's great to have you down. And, of course, the Shaw School, a lot going on now.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while.
Absolutely. The Ruth Face and Shaw Foundation has kicked off recently to help highlight finger painting even to a greater degree. But, of course, you kicked off the Shaw School and Studio in, was it 2001?
It was 2001, although I'd been thinking about it for a long, long time. But 2001 seemed to be the right time.
Right. A good year in many ways, a tough year for folks in a lot of ways, obviously all over the country, but a great way to kick off. It says right there when I visited the website even much earlier this morning, fingerpainting.org,
yes,
opening the doors of imagination, opening the doors of imagination. Yes. That's a quote actually from Ruth Face and Shaw.
That is correct. Ruth Face and Shaw, who introduced finger painting to the world in 1931. It was her belief that we all should have the doors of imagination open to us. And she devoted her entire life to that. And that's the work that we continue to do even today.
It was wonderful. A piece in March of 2007 in Our State, the magazine, really did a great job of helping to open the doors to Ruth Face and Shaw. For a lot of folks who didn't know her, I think her birth in, was it 1888?
It was.
Kenansville down there?
In Kenansville, North Carolina, that's correct.
Right.
And so many people didn't know about her, and they didn't know about her life and the contribution that she made to art and to therapy. And that magazine article did a lot and went a long way to opening the eyes of North Carolina and beyond to her work and her life.
Absolutely. Real quick about yourself, Bryan. Are you originally from the area?
I am. I'm from Durham, North Carolina originally.
Right.
And I was, matter of fact, was living in Western North Carolina in 1985 when I had the opportunity to meet John Payne, who was her successor at the time.
Right.
And a year later, he invited me to come back to Durham, and I did, and I apprenticed with him for 7 years.
7 years?
7 years.
We 86 to 93.
That's
yeah,
correct.
Right.
And we worked intently together over those years, and it was a memorable time. And I just felt so fortunate to be able to work with him, and with her system, and with his work in psychology.
And he was at that time a psychologist?
That's exactly right. He was, matter of fact, it was a critical juncture in his life. He was making the transition from being a clinical psychologist into retirement. And the timing just seemed to be perfect. And at the time, I was really looking for a calling, a vocation. And I met him, and he told me the story of Ruth Face and Shaw and the history of finger painting and its North Carolina roots. And I said, I want to do this. I want to continue this work. And he said, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And we did. And I've been talking about it ever since. It's
For more than 2 decades now you've been talking about it.
21 years.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
I spent the first 7 years working closely with him. We painted together, we taught others, and we eventually created an oral history of his life as a clinician.
I saw that. It took you, it must be 5 months, was it, or even more?
It was every bit of 5 months, maybe a little longer.
Right.
And it was a magical time.
Right.
And we worked closely together. And from there, at his suggestion, he said, what I want you to do now is to remove yourself from the paint and to do a self-study. Devote as many years to the study of yourself and to Ruth Face and Shaw as an historical figure and her work, And I did that up until 2000. And that's the reason the school was founded in 2001. And now we've been doing this for 7 years, working in many different venues and coming to places like Myrtle Beach and on your show and at this wonderful place.
Traveling all over. In this Collectors Cafe, of course, they're not open in the morning nor for lunch, but for dinner.
Right.
Nightly, and obviously the tremendous crowd they get through here. Being in an art gallery, a little different, probably, than much of what you and your students, and now you have an apprentice, is that right?
I do. Her name is Jennifer Falchi, and I met her in 2003. And I was thinking driving down here, there are those junctions in life where special things happen.
Right.
And for me, it was 1985 when I met John, 1986 when I accepted the apprenticeship with him.
Right.
For me, again, it was meeting Jennifer in 2003 and her really getting the story of Ruth Basin Shaw and embracing the spirit of her work, especially as involved her work with her children in working artistically and with different craft projects. And for John, it was in the late 50s when he met Ruth Basin Shaw in Butner, North Carolina, as a clinician there, and having the opportunity to work closely with her for a number of years. And then, of course, for her, it was in 1926, that momentous day when little Leonardo went to the bathroom and didn't return. And I know you know a little bit about that.
What a great story. No, we want you to share that with viewers if you're comfortable, and that helps take us back to early days of Ruth Basin Shaw there when somebody there said, come to this Roman villa and help kick off the school.
What an amazing story. First of all, this woman born in 1888, Kenansville, North Carolina, rural area of North Carolina, grows up, becomes a school teacher, travels to Western North Carolina, teaches, then finds herself in Europe, only later to find herself by invitation in Rome, Italy. And it was there that little Leonardo, who was a member of the royal family, was in her school. And he came up to her and said, Miss Shaw, I've cut my finger. And she said, oh, we can do something about that. Here, take this red medicine to the bathroom, wash out the cut, and come right back. He didn't come back, so she went to go find him. And where did she find him? Painting big swirls on the bathroom door with the red iodine. And it was there that she said, now there's a magical idea. And she pursued that over the next 5 years.
He was obviously painting with his fingers.
He was painting with his hands, fingers, and arms.
With his arms as well.
With his arms as well. And she said that finger painting is a misnomer, that she let the children name it because she originally created it for them. And when the children asked, when the children were asked, why did you call it finger painting? They said, well, because we don't paint with brushes. But the point of fact is, she said, well, it's about the movement, and it's about liberating the child to move freely, and through that freedom of movement, to be inspired, to dream while awake, and to have meaningful images appear in the paint. And that's what she did over her lifespan.
Clearly for children then, not only for children now, obviously when John met her at Butner, that's a special place, and as a clinician there, recognizing the need to be able to help folks potentially on a mental illness side.
That's exactly right, and that was quite a turn in her life, because although she originally created for the children, she always called herself a school teacher. It became of great interest to the field of psychotherapy. Of course, psychotherapy was rather young. We're talking about in the late 20s now. She noticed many stories where special things happened with her children in the classroom. One story that's known is that there was a child in her class, and he was painting one day, and all of a sudden the child became very upset, and her, being the attentive teacher, went over and asked the child, what's wrong? And he was very frightened, and he said, that's the monster that visits me in the middle of the night and makes me wet my bed. And she said, oh, we can do something about that. And he said, oh, I don't think so, Miss Shaw. And she said, oh, yes, we can do it together. Let's send the monster back to the bucket. And he did that. He took his arm and he removed the monster from the page, sent it back to the bucket, to the water, and did that for a number of weeks. Several weeks later, there was a parent-teacher conference, and the parents were there, and they were very curious about what had happened with this child over the last few weeks, because they had noticed that his enuresis had stopped. His bedwetting had stopped. And they asked her, and she she was always very polite, although wanting to protect the confidence of the child.
Right, right.
And so, although didn't divulge the experience that the child had because she detected the child was rather embarrassed and modest about that event, she knew then that this is something special.
Absolutely. What a great example. And as you explained there, he continued to paint the monster daily.
Yes.
Or on a regular basis, and then would wipe it clean by the end of the class, let's say.
That's exactly right.
That's tremendous.
And it was through that, the catharsis,
right,
the cleansing, paint to bucket, that he was able to rid himself of the monster that did visit him in the middle of the night.
Absolutely.
And then eventually, of course, psychotherapy learned about this, especially Carl Menninger. And it was there that she was invited in the 40s to go to the Menninger Foundation, Topeka, Kansas, and work with his patients and the students that were there.
That is tremendous. Well, I think if folks take the time and track down that March issue of the March 2007 issue of Our State, they'll see that great point that you highlight, that so oftentimes as folks begin this on a therapeutic sense or on a mental illness sense, they're going to begin with nothing necessarily in mind and begin painting away and oftentimes turn into beautiful pieces much like this, just with nothing planned in their imagination.
Well, thank you. And that's actually what makes, I think, her technique so special, is that what we paint is that which comes from within. And by virtue of that, there's a special relationship that happens between the painter and the painting. A relationship, just as in life. And so much of her teaching and principles were in life. This particular painting, for instance, I did not set out to paint this still life, although I was very interested in still lifes at the time. I've been interested in the history of art since starting my work with John. And so I'm always looking for ways to re-express and express what I experienced out in the world. This is one of those examples.
This is a piece May of 2006, and that would take you over the course of a day, a week, or just an hour or so.
Ruth Shaw, whenever she was asked, how long does it take you to paint a painting, she would always say, well, ever how many years she had been practicing the medium, plus 15 minutes. Of course, what appears to be very simple at first glance it's a very specific technique, a very specific method, and that's why we have the school, because what we have found is finger painting thrived as a medium. Everyone knows what finger painting is. Most everyone under the age of 75, they've had the experience, but they don't know the history, they don't know the method. Her method was very specific. Her technique, very specific. And that's what we do. We work with individuals and groups in many different settings, whether it be in mental health, or whether it be in schools with cultural enhancement programs, or whether it be with professional organizations for team building. We work with different.
I saw that at fingerpainting.org. There's a great list of course, some of the events and services. I think I saw a law firm on there that you were the DeWitt Law Office in August.
That's right.
So experiencing lots of different venues for explaining the both technique as well as the history there. And fingerpainting.org is worth making the trip to check out the website, because it's got a lot of great examples of not only your own but also Jennifer Falchi's there.
That's correct. And we have some of her work.
She brought one of hers,
and some others.
Oh, boy, look at that.
This is Jennifer Falchi's, and this was on the heels of a visit that she made last year to your state, the Palmetto State. And it was here that she was inspired from the environment in which she experienced to paint these trees. Now, she had never actually painted these trees before, and although they appeared, and once they appeared, coming from her subjective experience, she chose to keep them.